Obviously, with people threatening harm against my little sister,
What kind of alcoholic beverage are you drinking?
I quit drinking in 2001. I actually bought a Monster Java. There's no alcohol in it.
You broke the radio.
From looking at it,
You ever meet an Amish individual?
I met a couple.
I'm Amish in sin. I love the radio.
I'm not Amish, I'm just strange. I'll be back, Kyle. Anyway, a lot of people wanted to help put a stop to this abuse, wanted to put a stop to violence, but they didn't want to understand how or why. There's also a lot of people who believe that the reciprocation of violence is the only thing that these people will understand. And, well, unfortunately, history has shown them to be the right ones. History has shown them to be the ones that are correct. History has shown that tyrants don't give up power without violence. Did Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put a stop to what was happening to black people? No, he did not. Matter of fact, he slid black folk back about 15, 20 years. The reality is, it was a fellow Nebraskan whose tactics actually created effective change. The man went by Malcolm X. But truly, it was a Black Panther Party for self-defense walking onto the floor of the California Senate, locked and loaded. See, it's okay for the government and their goons to lay siege upon you and your neighborhood. But how dare you fight that? That scares the living shit out of them. And why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it scare the living shit out of people that their victims are armed and, at that point, willing? Now let's talk about the lady I just spoke with tonight. This is the first opportunity other than work I had to actually sit down and talk with her, and it was really just a bunch of walking around talking, but she's trying to understand. She told me to send her a message. She was raised to do things differently. She was raised to do things the way I was raised to do them. And part of that is you don't call the cops. They ain't your friends. They're not going to help you out. You are poor folks. Anyway, there's several people trying to help me, to the best of their understanding and ability anyway. It's the time that it takes that a lot of these folks don't understand. Some of them, they never been through it. And some of them, they've been through too much of it. Some of them know what the mentally ill tag really is, what it really means, and what it really does. And some of them are going to blow it off every time I tell them I'm being harmed over it. Earlier today, I made sure I sent a message to a lady who's trying to help. I let her know what it's like when I'm having a freak out attack and why. It's over time. Also, there's the daughter of one of the folks that's trying to help me. She is helpful. She knows quite a bit. Just for her, it's a difficult thing to find the time. So, she's friends with one of my predator's kids. And apparently they want to get a hold of me. And so I was sent that person's phone number today to send a message. I'm pretty sure as soon as that person messages me, I'll probably stop talking about the situation. Because at that point, I'll be possibly actively doing something to end it. Peacefully. Nobody wants to be brutalized. Nobody wants to be raped. Nobody wants to be beaten. I do what I can to stop the abuse. This lady tonight, she understands some things that a lot of other people here won't understand. And that's a good thing. Also, the area that she's from, I know it. Some towns are smart enough to have a north side and south side of the tracks. That's because the two peoples are so incredibly different. When people say the south side of the tracks, that doesn't mean literally south side of the tracks necessarily. It's a reference to high ground. On one side of the tracks is a hill. On the other side of the tracks is a lake. When it rains on top of the hill, it drains down to the lake now, doesn't it? South side of the tracks is the poor folks. The ones who have rules like you never talk to the police. They're not your friends. The side of the tracks where they say the only thing worse than a pedophile is a snitch. Then you got the north side of the tracks. The people who have money, the people who have opportunities, the people who work together. A lot of people in the homeless community here have done fucked up shit to me. But you know what? Some of them have gone out of their way to try to rectify the situation. Robert Farnsworth knocked his shit off. He even gave me a couple bucks more than once. In the last 40 times I've seen him, he has not started any shit. He's left me alone. With Ashley, you know, we had our differences, still got differences. I mean, shit, we're people. But she don't think it's all right to be harming me over something that she's already seen. Part of the reason she stuck up for me is because she already knew that the guy that killed Natalie was already in prison. She was also already aware that people were threatening to kill my sister and my niece. The screenshot on the front of this does show that. There were some cops here earlier. They keep going by this vision center, and it's probably every other night or so now. Every night almost. They stop by this feller late at night, or later at night anyway, after it's dark. They talk to him for about 30 minutes, and then they leave again. they've established a pattern of doing that since I got here. So it's not like something that I'm not familiar with. But not every time they park there is it for that. Sometimes they park there because they got somebody they want to harass. A lot of people don't like the cops for good reason. It's because they're poor. They know better. They say, hey, I don't know what to do. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. Well, the wonderful thing about the United States of America is power in numbers, safety in numbers. If you go in together, you've got less of a chance of getting blown off and far less of a chance of getting bullied. Now, with the young lady that was trying to get a hold of me, that's the. One moment. There's one lady that's been trying to get a hold of me. I was going to give out some information there that I'm going to have to wait on. And the kid of one of my predators that was trying to reach out to me, I don't know if it's the same one. Apparently, this person has more than one kid. So it might be possible that more than one of them are trying to get a hold of me. And I'm willing to talk to them as long as they're not getting a hold of me to harass me over him. As long as they're not getting a hold of me to try to threaten, harass, intimidate, or coerce me. And I don't think that's the case. I think that the person who told me genuinely wants to help and genuinely wants the abuse to stop. And I think that the person that wanted to get a hold of me is likely to be of a similar mindset. Obviously, they've been talking about me in the situation, and obviously, I'm not out to hurt anybody. It's not okay for people to hurt me repeatedly, call me mentally ill, and get away with it. But that's what's going to continue to happen as long as you guys won't take a look, as long as you guys won't speak out. I refuse to get violent. But when I speak of violence, I'm talking about physical violence. How many times is somebody allowed to harm you before you're allowed to defend yourself? Making me go back to police officers that bullied me is completely fucked. Making me literally go back to the police officers that I'm trying to turn them into themselves, is a felony. It's a felony that the Nebraska State Troopers took part in. It's a felony that Nebraska needed to remedy, but they didn't. What does going to your predators when your predator has a position of power that they can abuse to have you arrested for trying to turn them in? What good is it to force them to go to their predators for help? What good is that going to do? Are they really going to investigate? In Chapel, Nebraska, Dual County Sheriff Scott DaCosta knew I was trying to turn him in, and Nebraska State Troopers forced me to turn it into him, despite the fact that it's a felony, and knowing full well that it's a felony. "18 months. Scott DaCosta and his deputies ran around Chapel, Nebraska telling people I was schizophrenic, telling people I was making everything up. trying to drag it out and convince people not to help me, that's called gaslighting. It's also an abuse of power. And there is no statute of limitation on an abuse of power. It doesn't matter if you're Scott DaCosta, Judge Dorwart, or Lynn Paul, or Leslie Paul for that matter. Between Lynn Paul and Leslie Paul, which one of them has the position of power? Well, Leslie Paul married Clint Snell, one of the people implicated in threatening my life, implicated by his own brother, Carl Snell. It's a big, giant fucking mess, and people don't understand how big a mess it is. Just because it's a big mess doesn't mean that it's unbeatable. My predators made it a big mess on purpose. Because then they can make it their word versus mine, because nobody gives a shit once it's complicated. They want an easy in, easy out. Anyway, one thing I've been trying to explain through the whole Wolnez situation, and prior to that, the situation with James Murphy, there's also the situation with Robert Farnsworth, the situation with Molly and Tom, the situation with Vicky Rain and Nick. Some of these people had good intentions. Some of them had severe mental issues that were getting in the way of their thinking process. But to pretend that every person on the street is a schizophrenic nut job out to hurt you is fucking ludicrous. How could you think that? There's also a lot of people that don't understand the power of their voice because they've always been on the south side of the tracks. People who tell me, it won't work, Sean, I'm a felon, and I tell them, hey, Natalie Bollinger's rapists were felons as well. They were heard, and I was not. Guess who's not a felon? That's right, folks. Sean David Schwartz is not a felon. In Dual County, Nebraska, when I tried to turn in the Dual County Sheriff, Scott DaCosta, and his deputies to himself, they pressed over 30 charges against me and had to drop every single one of them. Every single one. Over a dozen instances where they threatened, harassed, intimidated, and lied to get what they wanted. Where my predators got to be in control of the situation simply because they had badges, I was illegally prevented from turning them in. No matter how many times I filled out the paperwork and took it in, it's always somebody else's job. No matter how they tell me to do it, when I do it the way I'm told, they tell me it's the wrong way and I have to do it another way. So then I fight hard to be able to do it that other way. And I try to reach out and get it done that way. And they tell me that's the wrong way. I have to go back and do it the way I did it the first time. Let me give you an example here. I called 911 over somebody assaulting my vehicle here. When I called 911, the cops showed up and bullied me and tried to send me to mental health. I went to mental health. They told me that I needed to go to the police about it. So I went back to the police about it, and the police told me, well, you should have called 911. Assholes. Hey, why don't you quit talking over me and listen to what the fuck is going on? You literally have the officer that when I called 911, that officer showed up for once. Then he bullied me. And then later on, he wants to tell me I should have called 911. Holy fuck, I fucking did. Because of the abuse that I've had to endure, I'm gonna have a fucking meltdown over this shit. There's a goddamn time limit. Most of the people who fucked up, and fucked up big, they never intended on harming me in the beginning. They were afraid of the cops and afraid of what people would think. When you're on the streets, you don't go to the cops about child molesters. You invite them up the mountain with a bottle. 2 men go up the mountain and only one comes back down. And that's how people out here expect you to deal with it. They expect you to talk tough about how you'd do this to a pedophile and do that to a pedophile. And the reality is pedophiles are protected. Why am I not protected when these people are harming me? Why is it not considered a hate crime when people call me a pedophile and assault me? Isn't it a hate crime to assault a pedophile? Well, the simple fact of the matter is I'm not a pedophile, so I don't get those protections. Only pedophiles are protected from being abused for being a pedophile. If you abuse an innocent man for being a pedophile, well, that's not a hate crime. You're allowed to do that. You're not allowed to stand up to a pedophile. That's considered a hate crime too. Teresa Mycelia has her own YouTube channel now. She's a victim of rape in Boulder, Colorado, and of systemic abuse by the Boulder Police Department, including one of my predators. The police did not want to investigate. They make too much money off of rolling us through. And once they got their snares in you, once they got their hooks in you, by calling you mentally ill, there's nothing you can do for the rest of your life but take the abuse.